All right, welcome everybody. I am so excited to be here. For those of you that don't know me already, I'm a colored pencil artist. I work with lots of different media, but color pencil is my main media. And tonight I want to talk to you guys a little bit about introductory color pencil technique and how to blend, how to lay down your first colors, and some color theory as well. So hopefully you guys have had a chance to trace the color wheel that I sent out to you over the last week or so. You will have a template that has 12 little pizza slices cut into little individual windows, and we're going to start filling that in. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, and you'll be able to see my easel. Looking good? Everybody can see it? Okay, and we're gonna start. It doesn't actually matter where you start on this. I'm gonna start with red and you can come along with me, but I have this blue one finished so you kind of know where we're going. And for those of you that don't know what a color wheel is already, I've got one finished over here. A color wheel shows the relationship between the primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. And it's a really great way to understand how colors are related, how colors mix together. And then you can take this information into abstract art, realistic art, color pencil, oil painting, everything. It's kind of your foundational beginning entry-level project for anything that you want to do with color. So I'm using Derwent Chromaflow colored pencils today, and I'm using Scarlet, but you can use any red colored pencil that you have available. And you're going to start in the second ring. So if you think of this as like a cross section of a tree and the outside ring, we're going to leave that alone for a second. We're going to come into the second ring and you're going to begin coloring that one in with me. And this, I started with an outline. If you choose to outline it, just do it very lightly. Don't press too hard. That'll help define the borders. And you might be asking already, like, okay, does that have to be in this one? Does that have to be in this one? Does that? No, it doesn't matter. Any piece of pie is completely fine. Just come into one and you're going to start applying your color. So when you apply colored pencils, one thing that's really important to do is to start with sharp colored pencils. Your paper has a tooth to it. Tooth kind of refers to the texture of the paper. Think of this as like little pores in the paper. So you want your pencil to get into all of those little pores, and it's only going to be able to do that if you have a sharp pencil. If your pencil's really dull, you're going to have a lot of white showing through, which probably isn't the look that you're going for. But with several layers with a sharp colored pencil, you'll be able to get rid of that. Some other things to keep in mind when you're laying down kind of preliminary color is to go in kind of a circular motion. So you'll see I'm working in little ovals. I'm going in lots of different directions. That helps me lay down even coverage over the entire area. And I start off with like handwriting pressure, or maybe a tiny bit lighter. And then as I build up the color on my paper, I can add a little bit more pressure as I go. So now I'm going over with a second layer. I'm using those little ovals. I'm using a little bit heavier than handwriting pressure. I'm slowing down and being a little more careful in the corners. And this is just a basic one color application of color. If I start pressing really hard, I will start flattening the tooth of the paper. And this does something called burnishing. I'm going to have like a waxy surface or a waxy sheen over the top if I press really hard, which might be exactly what I'm going for on this single color. So here I've got one color in. I'm going to give you guys a second to kind of continue working on that. And then maybe Gianna, would you let me know if there's any questions in the chat? If you guys have questions at any point, you can pop them in the chat and I'd be happy to answer them. They can be questions about this, or they can be other general color pencil questions. I'm happy to answer anything.
We have no questions so far, but I'm keeping an eye on it. So if anybody has any questions, send them in.
So I'm sharpening up my pencil over here. You can hear that. And I'm going to begin working on the outer ring. So the next strategy or technique that I'm going to teach you is how to apply a gradient. So you can see over here that the outer ring has lighter color, and it actually goes from darker to lighter as it moves out away from the main color or the hue. So to do that, I'm going to be applying colored pencil the same way in those little circles, but I'm going to start with medium to light pressure. And as I work my way up towards the outer edge, I'm lightening up my pressure a little bit at like every circle. I'm just lightening it up a little bit until I'm barely touching the surface. And I'm going to do that several times as I work away from that main hue. I'm lightening it up. I'm pressing less and less and less. Now, practicing gradients is important for several reasons. You probably see gradients all over the place. You'll see gradients as you move across the surface of a flower petal or over the surface of a cheek if you're drawing portraits. Gradients are also a really fun way to kind of play around with mixing colors. So right now we're just doing a medium red to a lighter red, but you can do gradients from red to orange or from red to green even. So very, very useful technique.
Anna, we have two questions. So the first one, which I think is correct, we're starting on the second ring. The first darker one was the second ring from the outside, correct?
Exactly, yes. The hue or the main color that hasn't been altered at all is in that second ring from the outside.
Okay, perfect. And then the other question was same colored pencil, or did you switch colors?
No, it's the exact same color pencil. These are great questions. Thanks so much for clarifying everything. I'm still using just a red colored pencil. And mine is a Scarlet Chromaflow, but you can use any red color pencil that you have available. So I'm going over it with the second layer, just kind of with a perpendicular oval. So perpendicular referring to going the opposite direction. I'm laying down a little bit more pigment towards the inside. And as I move out, I'm laying down less and less. So that I have a lot of white from the paper showing through, which is making that color look lighter towards the outer edge. But I'm not going to just use red for this one. I'm actually going to use my white as well. So I'm transitioning over to my white colored pencil. And I'm going to work with medium to heavy pressure, working from the outside in. So I'm pressing quite hard on the outside. And as I move towards the inside, I'm lightening that pressure up a little bit. Now I can work a couple different layers. I can do this. You know, I can add the white, I can add a little bit more red, I can add the white, I can add a little bit more red, back and forth. But the more pressure I put down with my white, the more difficult it's going to be to add more color later. So just keep that in mind. If you press super, super hard, you're probably not going to be able to lay any more red down over the top. So this is laying the white down over the top of this other color with a lot of pressure is burnishing, like I mentioned before. And this is a great technique for creating portrait colors, adding that white over the top and blending it. And this is great for light or dark skin portraits. You're going to have a lot of like warm, light pinks and reds. And this is a great way to create those colors. So at this point, you now have the hue, the main true color, and then you've got a gradient where you have gone from a light red to an even lighter red. And that red plus white is called a tint. So you have this on your printout. You've got the vocabulary there, but I'll just reinforce it as we go. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next ring, which is going to be the third ring in from the outside. As I transition, Gianna, are there any other questions? Are we doing good?
Not at this time.
Okay, great.
Thanks for asking.
So, oh, I lost my color pencil. Sorry about that. Okay, so as we come in, these ones are going to move a little bit faster because they're smaller. We're going to lay down a very light layer of red coming in from the center. And then this one is going to, just so you know where we're going to add red, black, and white. So we're going to have kind of a reddish gray color, and you can see that right over here in my image. This is going to be a color that you would use like in the shadows of skin tones, or perhaps like in the shadows of florals, muted tones like in shadows and interiors as well. If you're drawing like a room or a house, you're not always going to have everything super high intensity. So you're going to want to have some options on diluting your color. One way to dilute your color is to add some black to it. So black is a very strong color, so I'm adding a very small amount to it as I go in. I'm using a sharp black pencil. I'm going in those little tiny ovals, a light layer over the top. I'm trying to keep it as even as possible. And then I'm going to burnish with white. So if you remember from our previous discussion, burnish is going to be a lot of pressure with white. So if this were a recipe, I would be adding 2 to 3 times as much white as I did black, just to get kind of an even ratio of color, if that makes sense. So I guess not an even ratio, but you need more white than black to create this gray. So lots of pressure on the white. And now we've created a tone, which is the hue, the true color, plus black and white. And that's giving us a more diluted red so that we can use that in shadows and less intense areas. Our final one that we're going to approach in this area for right now is the red plus black, which is a shade. And we're going to start it the exact same way. We're going to add a little bit of red throughout that small window. This is now the 4th ring in. And I've done kind of like a light to medium coverage, actually probably more like a medium coverage. And I'm going to go over it with a medium to light amount of black, less black than red for this one. And I'm not using white for this one. So for burnishing, I'm actually going to add a lot of pressure with my red over the top to really get those colors to blend in. This is also a good opportunity to kind of clean up the edges with this black. So I'm not going to try to heavily outline it, but with a very light outline that I then kind of turn into a shape as I transition it away, I can create some nice clean edges.
Lana, we have one question from Elizabeth asking, if my colors are not blending well, could it be the quality of the pencils? Depending on...
Tell me, Elizabeth, tell me what colored pencils you're using. It can be, but it also can be, you know, like if this is a brand new project for you, it could just be experience and time. So it depends on the color pencils. Type into the chat what kind you're using. Did she let you know?
Art Skills brand.
Art Skills brand. That sounds like a crafty colored pencil, which is probably going to be a lower quality. And that can affect blending. Definitely, like the ones that I'm familiar with is like a Crayola colored pencil. Those ones not going to blend super well. The ones I'm using, the Derwent Chromaflows, they're more of like an entry-level brand of colored pencil. So they're priced a little bit cheaper than like the high-end colored pencils, but they're still artist grade. So they have a really good like blending capacity. So it can be that. It also can be like, if other people are having issues with blending, there's a couple other things that might be going on. So I'm using a piece of Bristol paper, which has a moderate amount of tooth to it. So it's got a little bit of a light texture. Whereas if I were using printer paper, it would be so slick that it would be hard to layer your colors. So that is another thing that could be happening. And then the other thing is just time and experience. So being able to really manipulate colored pencil and being able to get the colored pencils to do what you want takes time and practice. And you will have 12 opportunities to do this as you move around the color wheel. So don't stress out if it's not looking perfect. You don't have to share this with anybody if you don't want to. It's just an exercise to learn color and to explore color a little bit more. So hopefully that answers your question. So I've got 2 of the primary colors here now. We're going to pop yellow in there. Then we'll have all 3. I know you guys don't have blue. You'll probably need to do that after our class is done. But then we're going to start getting into mixing colors together a little bit more. So When you go and do your yellow one, I want to make sure that these are spaced correctly. So if this one is my red and I leave 1, 2, 3 spaces, my 4th space is going to be my yellow. I'm going to outline that. And if you know that you are going to kind of have a difficult time figuring out where all these colors are supposed to be, I'm going to write over here on this paper the order that these colors are going to go in. So the first one we're going to have is red. Then we're going to have red, orange, orange, yellow, orange, yellow, green, yellow, green, green, blue, green, blue, blue, violet, violet, red, violet, oops, red, violet, and then it'll go back to red again. So this is your little cheat sheet as we go. If for some reason you're like, okay, where are they going to go? This is the order that they're going to need to be in. To get from red to yellow, leave 3 spaces. On the 4th one, you'll have the yellow, and you're going to do it the exact same. So you're going to fill in a solid block of color with your yellow. We're doing yellow second though, because yellow is a little less forgiving than red. You're going to, especially when you start adding black, you're going to need to be very careful and very delicate with your black. And so I wanted you to practice with the red first before we get into that. Part of the reason why red is a little bit more forgiving than yellow is just because of the color value. So red is a darker color. So when you're mixing it with an even darker color, black, it's a little more forgiving. With yellow, it's such a light value color mixed with such a dark value color. We're just going to be really careful with that. All right, so you've got your hue marked in the second ring. As we go out, we're going to create that gradient again. So this is your second opportunity to practice a gradient. You're going to start with a medium amount of pressure at the inside, and as you move away from it, you're going to lighten your pressure. I'm working at an easel. My paper is fixed onto the easel, and I'm not going to move it around because that's going to be overwhelming to watch, but you can switch and twist this around any way you want. So get into a position for you that is comfortable, that feels good on your wrist. I don't want you to like force it into any position, and you can twist and turn this as much as you want. So I've got my gradient started here, and we're going to go over the top with white. We're going to grab white on the outer edge. Now you might have a little bit of red on your colored pencil. If you've got a scratch piece or just a little area around the border, you might just want to kind of clean it off a bit first, just so you're not transferring any of that red that might have gotten picked up on your colored pencil over. Another way to clean it is to pop it in the sharpener and then just give it a nice clean point. That's also going to clean it off, and it'll keep your color mixtures a little cleaner. So here I'm coming in with lots of pressure on the outer edge. I am lightening up the pressure as I move towards the center, same as before.
Lana, in reference to pressure, we had a question.
Yeah.
You keep referencing pressure you're using. What is the technique for us to determine what pressure we're using?
What is the what to determine? Say that one more time.
Like technique of determining how much pressure you're using, I guess.
So if I understand that question right, it's like, you know, if you're doing a project on your own, how would you determine how much pressure you use in a given situation? And if that's the question that you're asking, then I would always err on the side of like very light pressure to begin with, because colored pencils are not the most forgiving medium. It's always easier to put more colored pencil on than to take colored pencil off. So I usually start with a light amount. Like for instance, on the screen, I'm looking at the recording, and these don't look very different right now. And on my end, they look different, but they don't look very different here. Hopefully you were able to create a more convincing gradient. And in this situation, I can't like undo it. And so I would always start with lighter pressure and then build up. Once you feel really confident about what you've done, you can add more pressure. So to compensate for that and to make it look a little bit more like a gradient that's lighter than the one within, I'm going to add a little bit more pressure to that one in the second ring. Now, the other way that I'm interpreting that question is just like maybe I need to describe what I mean by certain pressures a little bit more so everybody is on the same page. And if that's the question, then when I say like light pressure, I'm talking a little less than handwriting pressure, or maybe even significantly less than handwriting pressure. And when I'm saying heavy pressure, I'm talking about pressure that is so heavy that you would be indenting thin paper and it would go right through. So whoever asked that question, thanks so much for posing the question. Hopefully I answered it in some way or another. And if I didn't, please ask some more questions so that we can get there. I'm moving into the third ring now. I've laid down a medium level of a medium amount of yellow. So I've covered the tooth of the paper. There's not a lot of white coming through, but I haven't pressed so hard that it now has like a waxy sheen like this one on the second row. And I'm going to come in with my black, and that's the one that we talked about where this is not going to be very forgiving. So we are using incredibly light pressure because I can't go back. I can't backpedal pressure here, or I can't backpedal my pigment very much. So for my light pressure here, this is basically like, how would I describe it? I'm barely laying anything down. It's as if like, if you were to like go over the top of your hand, your arm, and you were just barely touching the hairs on your arm. Like you're not quite touching the skin. It's like that amount of pressure. Hopefully that's descriptive enough. And that's answering the question about pressure a little bit better. You can still go in a couple different directions. You just don't want to lay down too much. And if it's clunky, don't worry about that. We're just practicing. And also learning kind of about how we would mix color. This is not something I do a lot in my projects, mixing yellow with black. It's not the most efficient way to create a darker version of yellow. I would prefer to kind of have a larger set of colored pencils and grab a darker yellow that is closer to that. But for a color wheel and learning about color theory, this is something that we practice doing. And so I've got a very light layer of black over there, and now I'm going to go over the top with white. When I come over the top with white, I'm now using very, very heavy pressure. So I really want to lighten up what I put down. I want this to read as a gray rather than like a dark black. So I'm putting a lot of pressure down. That also is going to help mix my colored pencils a bit.
Lana, we have some questions about what kind of paper, and just like there's one asking if mixed media paper is toothy enough. If you want to start with that. Mixed media paper
is probably toothy enough. So this is like an exercise, right? These aren't usually projects that you're going to frame or sell or anything. This is like a color theory exercise. So like the most important thing is that you're using something that you have available and that you're doing it. Outside of that, papers that are going to be a little bit more, you'll be more successful with, a mixed media probably is just fine. Sometimes some of those that are made for like watercolor can be a little too toothy. So if it's got like holes and pores in it, so Gianna's using the Inktense paper. You probably, if you're following along with us, Gianna, you're probably noticing that paper is a little too toothy. You're getting kind of color stuck in the grooves. You want something a little smoother than that, but not so smooth it's like slip copy paper. So I'm using a Bristol paper. I like that quite a bit. A drawing paper, like a 90-pound drawing paper that would be in like a nice sketchbook, that would be a great paper to use. Even sketch paper is okay, although sometimes it's so thin, it just doesn't give you a lot when it comes to layering. You said questions plural though. What other questions do we have about materials?
Yeah, going through it now, I guess that was kind of the main question. I think they just wanted more clarity on the paper.
Okay.
Another question we have, if you can take it, coming back to that one on the pressure, she was looking for a method to use your pencil on a consistent basis to control your pressure from light to hard. When she's using her pencil with heavy pressure, how much pressure you're applying when you're doing it lighter, just kind of what point you hold your pencil at, I guess.
What point I hold my pencil?
Yeah, that's what, for the lighter pressure.
For the lighter pressure.
Yeah.
I still don't know if I like understand the question.
I know, I feel like it's kind of hard to explain over that.
But I know it's so hard, like when we're not holding materials and like looking at them together. But I will talk a little bit more about that. And hopefully if I say enough about pressure, I'll like get to what you're asking. What's the name of this artist that's questions?
Sam.
Who?
Sam.
Sam, S-A-M?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Sam, then I can like address you directly. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the orange one and I'll talk a little bit about pressure as we go. I am actually using an orange pencil, just an orange pencil in the set, but if you only have red, yellow, and blue, or if you only want to use red, yellow, and blue, and you want to give yourself a little extra challenge, you can mix this orange by adding the red and the yellow. And we're going to begin doing mixing some color as we go into the red and the red orange here. But you could do the same thing here. If you want to start with some red and yellow and mix them up and create that perfect blend between the red and the yellow and create orange, you totally can do that here. So Sam, when it comes to pressure right now, it sounded like you were interested in learning how to create a really consistent mark with pressure. That was part of what I was teasing out of that. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But a way to practice that is just simply by like, filling in even squares. Like this is a really good strategy, a really good practice to get your pressure even. So even pressure can be kind of just a skill to practice in and of itself. If you're saying like, if you're feeling like it's not looking very even, it's just just practice. So I'm kind of dancing around that in an awkward way, but I think some things that help that practice more efficiently, working in the little circles helps me create kind of like a rhythm to what I'm doing. So I have a really even pressure. The alternative being if I was laying down strokes, I think it's harder to create a consistent texture or consistent pressure that way. It also gives me like a little cramp in my arm. So that isn't a method that works for me very well. Working in like kind of ovals and overlapping them is one that is a strategy that works really well for me to kind of build up even an even gradient or even texture with my pencil.
Another question is, what particular sharpener do you use? And do you ever use Vaseline or solvents with your pencils?
Okay, so we're not, so colored pencil sharpener. Here's the sharpener that I use. I like this one because it's a Derwent super sharp sharpener and it sharpens them to a really fine point. But I know that sharpeners like hand crank sharpeners or handheld sharpeners are not for everyone. They can just be uncomfortable and messy and whatever. And electric sharpeners are totally fine too. I've got nothing like super against them other than they can eat up your pencils. Sometimes they can like sharpen them a little more than they need to and you just lose some pencil. And some of the other color pencils that I use are quite expensive and I just don't want to sharpen them all away. So I like to do them manually. But another sharpener I like is like a little silver I think it's called a cum eraser. Oh, here's one, KUM. I like this one as well. And this is a nice like travel one, really portable. You just have to have something to dump the shavings in. Solvent, we're not going to do any solvent on this just for simplicity's sake, because we're just in a short class tonight. But on my own projects, I do use solvent. And I think that solvent can be a really great tool when you use it safely to blend your colored pencils. For those of you that are not familiar with solvent, don't know what that is, don't know what I'm talking about. Solvent is often used in oil paintings. It's odorless mineral spirit. Some people call it OMS. And it's used to break the pigment in the oil paint away from the binder in the oil paint, so it can kind of thin it out. People use it to clean up their paintbrushes sometimes. And but it does something similar with colored pencils. It breaks the pigment away from the binder in the colored pencil, and it works the pigment into the tooth of the paper. And I actually talk, since I can't get into that or demo that tonight, but if you're interested in it, then I want you to check out my YouTube channel, and you can just type in Lana Glowshot Art, and that's GLOSCHAT. I think that that's going to be put in the chat so that you have access to that. And I have a video on all like 10 things that you need to know about solvent, how to use it safely, because it is kind of a more toxic material. You want to make sure that you are using it appropriately, and I'll have some strategies and different things that you can do with solvent if you are interested. And my YouTube channel is just filled with tons of free tutorials, colored pencil reviews, tips, everything, all kinds of things. So hopefully you feel comfortable using that as a resource if you're interested. So I've been talking about a lot of other things, but I have since moved on to the orange one. I'm working on the piece of pie right between red and yellow. I've done my hue, so that's just the orange. And then I've done my gradient where I use a medium amount of pressure on the inside and I lighten it as I move away from the center. Now I'm going to come back with my white. And just like I did before, I'm going to clean off my white on a scratch piece of paper just to make sure I'm not transferring any other pigment over. And I'm going to start with a lot of pressure on the outside in those little circles. So we've been talking about pressure. When I say a lot of pressure, this is pressure that would indent the paper if I was using a ballpoint pen on printer paper. You know, you would pick it up and you would feel a texture on the other side. That's how hard I want you to press. When you're doing this, I don't necessarily want you like right on top of it. I want you to turn your pencil on the side a little bit, pull your hand back, and I want you to work in your little ovals with your pencil a little bit more close to like parallel to your drawing surface. So if you're working on a table, it's parallel, it's closer to parallel to the table. And that allows you to add a lot of pressure without like pushing it too directly into the paper. I'm hoping that I'm coming closer to answering Sam's question there. Sam, if I am getting closer, will you please let me know? and if you have some more follow-up questions on pressure, let me know about that as well. But I have created that gradient where I'm a little lighter on the outside, I'm darker on the inside, and I can even go over the top with a little bit more orange towards the middle of the circle, so that I have more of that gradient effect. And I can also, so we are moving quick tonight because we want to cover as much of this as possible. And I want to give you as much information about colored pencils as possible. But when you have some time later, you might want to come in and clean up some of the edges and just refine your project so it looks really nice and something you're proud of at the end. We're moving into the third ring. That's going to be that orange with the red, orange with the black and white. And at this point, we practiced this 3 times, so you kind of know where we're headed. I'm going to do it pretty quick. And if for any reason you're not moving as quickly as me, that is not a problem at all. I'm going to slow down quite a bit on the next one so that we can mix that red and the orange together as a group. I don't want to leave anyone hanging there. So I'm just going to lightly go over the top with my black, and then I'll go over the top with my white. But this would be a great opportunity to answer any questions that are lingering out there. And they can be about this project, or they can be about other color pencil topics or supplies or whatever.
Yeah, I've got some coming in. One that I think you've kind of been clarifying during this one is that you were using white on the outer ring and then going in more with a little bit of black and white on this one, and then going in with more black on the darkest one, correct?
Yes. So overall, you're going to have this effect that's going to go from light to dark as we move in. So adding white on the outer ring, adding white and black on the third ring in, which is going to be, we call this a tone. And then the just color plus black on the fourth ring, which is called a shade. And if you printed out the template, that all those definitions are on there, and it should have the recipes for the colors as well. So hopefully that will clarify anything if I miss it along the way.
And then one other one, do you ever use baby oil instead of solvent?
I have seen people use that. I personally haven't. It just seems like a mess to me, and I kind of question the archival nature of it. When I'm using solvent, and when I say archival, that just means like, you know, is this going to be something that is going to stand up that I would feel comfortable selling, or is it going to like deteriorate over time? And baby oil just kind of, it gives me kind of, I don't know, I just don't trust it being something that is going to really be a long-term solution. When I use solvent, I'm using artist grade solvent that is made to last. It's an archival product. I like Gamsol by Gamblin, and that's an oil painting brand. I also like Eco House, which is a Canadian brand of solvent. And I use a product called Neutral Thin or citrus. It's a citrus blender. And these are all like graded for artists. They're all like made as safe as possible. So when you're working with a toxic material, it's important that you are finding the safest one possible. These are all like odorless, so you're not breathing in any unnecessary particles there. I was going to say something else. Oh, and obviously baby oil isn't going to be toxic when you're using it. It just seems messy to me, but you know, there's no reason that you can't experiment with it. And there are tons of artists that use that. I just don't choose to.
And then just a little mid-class pick-me-up for you. They're really enjoying your teaching skills, and they're asking, when will you be doing your next Michael's class?
Oh, that's so sweet of you guys. Thank you so much. And I actually have the next Michael's class next month. That's going to be a premium class. So you'll need a reserve early because I think you guys cap that at 50, right? And we have like, how many people do we have in here tonight? We have quite a few signed up.
We have 235.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so if you are interested in doing this class, so we're going to be doing these purple cone flowers with colored pencil. We're going to be working on this one together. I'm going to teach you some strategies on actually like looking at a photo reference, blending the color, creating those, I'll leave that up for another second, creating those textures. And if you want to make one of these with us, that will be next month. I believe it's July 17th. Am I right on that? Gianna, you can check on that probably, right?
I can check on it.
And then you'll let us know. It's a Thursday next month. But while I'm transitioning, while Gianna's looking that up, I am going to move on to this one in between red and orange. So red is a primary color. Orange is a secondary color because it is created when red and yellow are mixed together. I'm now creating a tertiary color. I'm going to mix the red and the orange together. And I'm going to do this very similarly to when I add black or white to it. I'm going to start with a very thin, even layer. I'm using medium pressure. So this is just a little light, or probably light pressure. This is a little lighter than handwriting, but not necessarily as light as when I layered that black over the yellow, okay? So I'm using a medium amount of pressure. Orange and red are kind of similar intensity colors. So I'm going to start mixing these in even ratios, half orange, half red. I'm going to switch over to that orange right now. And my orange is kind of getting dull. Let me show you what that looks like. If I can get my camera to focus in here. That's too dull for me personally. I'm going to run it through the sharpener so that I can really get that pencil into the tooth of the paper. Okay, so that's a sharp pencil. You can tell the difference now, right? And when I'm teaching my live classes, I'm coming around to students and I'm a broken record, but I'm like, sharpen your pencil, sharpen your pencil. It really makes such a difference. And that's one of the things I see beginners kind of going wrong with more often than not, is that they're just not keeping their pencil sharp enough. So they're working with a blunt instrument. And if you're thinking like, you know, if you are a woodworker and you're working with blunt instruments, you're going to make your life a lot harder for you. So try to use sharp pencils, sharpen them, run them through as often as you can. And you don't have to run them through all the time, but just like keep your pencil sharp. Okay, the goal here when I'm mixing up my hue, my red orange, is equal amounts of both. So I'm not going to put a lot of pressure on until I've hit that perfect halfway point between the red and the orange. So I'm going to finish up this orange layer. I'm going to take a step back or just kind of lean my chair back. And I'm going to evaluate, is this closer to red? Is it closer to orange? Or is it exactly in the middle? And right now, I feel like it's close to the middle, but I need to add more pigment because I've got a lot of white coming through the paper right now. So I'm going to put a little bit more orange on. And now I'm moving probably too close to the orange. So I'm going to hit it with another layer of red. So when you're mixing up your tertiary colors, you can go back and forth between the red and the orange until you hit that spot where you're exactly halfway in between.
And for this color part, you are using both the red from the left side and then also using the pencil orange from the right side, correct?
Yes, I am. I'm using my red and my orange colored pencil, the exact ones that I used here. If I was only I've had students do this color wheel with only red, yellow, and blue before. And in a situation like that, if someone out there is choosing to do that, this would be mostly red with just a little bit of yellow in it. And that's the actual recipe of it. But it's a little bit easier for beginners to mix up a red orange when you're actually using an orange rather than a little tiny bit of yellow. But yes, I'm actually only using, for this entire color wheel, I'm only using 8 colored pencils: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, black, and white. And all of those colors are in the 12 set Chromaflow set. And if you are using a different brand of colored pencil, you can usually get your primary and secondary colors plus a white and a black in just about any 12 set that you grab. So while this is kind of fresh on our mind, mixing this tertiary, I'm actually going to pop down here and I'm going to do the same thing between the orange and the yellow. So I'm going to start with a very light layer of orange because this orange is going to be stronger than my yellow. I'm going to probably need more yellow than orange to get that even color in between the two. And that's part of why I'm doing them in this order. So you notice that I did my primaries first, and then I worked on the secondary in between them, the orange in between the red and the yellow. That gives me a reference point so that I can find my halfway point. If I just started with yellow and went immediately to yellow orange, the color that I'm mixing now, and I didn't have orange as a reference point, it would be really difficult to know exactly what my halfway point would be. So I'm going to start with just a very small amount of that orange. And now I'm going to go over the top with some yellow. And I am using more pressure here than I did in either color for my red orange. This yellow, like I said, it doesn't have as dark of a value. Value refers to how light or dark a color is. So I am using medium to heavy pressure. And I am using this kind of medium to heavy pressure to blend and and I'm going to evaluate if I've got that halfway point now. So I'm going to lean back. I'm going to look at it and see if it hits kind of right between the red and the orange and the yellow. And to me, I feel like this does. I'm going to clean up the yellow just a little bit towards the edge of that yellow. But to me, this is an even halfway point. But the recipe for this color was probably like 4 parts yellow to 1 part orange. So that's just kind of an important thing to keep in mind when you're mixing colors. So now we're going to take all of these lessons, we're going to put them together, and we're going to create a gradient with one of our tertiary colors. And we're going to do that by laying in the color. We'll go on the red orange first. I think that one's a little bit easier. So I'm going to start with my orange, but if you started with your red, that's fine. Either one to start with is fine. There's no right or wrong here. And I'm going to create my gradient by starting with a little bit more pressure at the inside and then lightening it up as I move towards the outside. As I get to the outside, that pressure is that like tickle your arm hair pressure. It's just barely touching the paper at that point. And then I'm going to do that with just my orange all the way around the outer edge. While I'm demoing that, if there's some more questions, I'm happy to answer a few more.
I'm looking through them again. One is if you have a limited set of pencils, kind of like how you were describing with a 12 pack. If you're mixing red, yellow, and blue, would it be better to go cyan, magenta, and yellow if you didn't have those colors? I believe is what it's asking. Red, yellow, and blue.
So if we're talking about like kind of like a finished piece rather than like an exercise like this, I think it just comes down to personal preference. So the cyan, magenta, yellow, black, that's kind of like a different type of color of primaries. It's the primaries that they use for printing on a computer or digital art. And if you like the look of that on a traditional surface like paper with colored pencils, that's totally fine. But typically with colored pencils, which is a traditional medium, we use like a red, yellow, blue rather than cyan, magenta, yellow. And our color theory is based on that. And then digital is based on the CMYK method or color scheme. So hopefully that answers your question. But if you have a cyan and a magenta and a yellow and you want to make a color wheel like this, go for it. I think that could be really cool. And you could even do like a limited palette exercise where you create, like, maybe draw a portrait or a flower with just those 3 colors and see what you get. Because part of what we're doing here is we are learning how to mix just about every color from what is essentially just 3 colors, red, yellow, and blue. Every one of these, even the orange is part yellow and part red. When we get to violets or greens, those are made up of just the primary colors as well. And so part of why we start with a color wheel is so that we can understand how all those relationships work together, so that when it comes to like mixing a really specific color, like see if I pull this back up and I'm looking to make a green. Well, this isn't a bright green, it's a muted green. How would I make a muted green? Well, I can come over here to my color wheel and I could say, oh, I could make a muted green by adding black to it. Or we haven't gone into this inner circle yet, and I'll touch on that before we leave today. But this inner circle is used by mixing the complement of green. Green mixed with red, complements are across from each other on the color wheel. And there is actually, I don't know if you can see it, if you zoom in really close, there is red mixed into this green that is created that more muted green on the stem, which is more true to life than like a really bright, intense green. So yes, that I don't know what the question was that started that little rant and ramble, but hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you enjoyed the journey there. Okay, I just finished the gradient on the red orange. I'm going to pop over while that's fresh, and I'm going to do the gradient on the yellow orange, and I'm probably going to sharpen up my pencils a bit just to make sure they're nice, sharp, ready to go.
And as you're sharpening, one question was, do you use an eraser, and what do you prefer? If you do.
Okay, hold on, let me.
Oh no, you're totally fine.
Just so that I'm not
making, I throw that at
you. Noise. Okay, so I really don't use an eraser at all on stuff like this. You just gotta cross your fingers and hope you do it right. You know, that's kind of one of the things about colored pencil that I love and hate. Not the most forgiving medium, but I think that colored pencil teaches you sort of how to go with it and how to adjust and adapt and how to build things up slowly so that you can compensate for that. Now, in some situations, there are some things that I do to remove color from my paper, and I'll show you a couple of them now. So if, let's say, I'm going to build up a little bit more of this orange here on my paper, and let's say I put too much on, I don't want it there, and I want to remove it. Now, if I don't have too much on, I can use some Scotch tape. I just had this on my desk over here. And you can lay it down on your surface. You can press it over the top, and I'm gonna, hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing. And then you can pull it off, and that actually pulls the colored pencil off. It lightens it up. And so that, and if you can see the orange, if I put it over the white, probably, you can see that I removed orange from my surface. So that is the way, like if I just put too much on, or maybe like my pencil strayed and I made a little mark that I didn't want, that's the way that I remove colored pencil from my project. But if I want to like create textures with an eraser, so maybe I'm drawing an animal and I want some fur texture and I want to remove colored pencil with a specific texture, I'll use an electric eraser. And I don't have one handy to show you, but basically, I wish I had one right here in my workspace. I think it's in my like little travel bag, but it's battery powered. It's going to use a lot of energy and pressure to remove it. And so it works a little bit better. What I don't ever do is I never will take like a kneaded eraser or a pink pearl eraser or something like that and just start rubbing it over the surface of colored pencil, because that ends up like just rubbing it into the tooth of the paper and blending it around in a funny, uneven way. And if you don't trust me, or if you're curious about what this looks like, do it on a scratch piece of paper and just see, because maybe you'll get an effect that you like. It's not one that I enjoy, so I just don't use erasers on my projects. So here on this gradient, I'm going over with more yellow than I did the orange. Was very light, very careful with that orange. And then over the top, I am using medium amounts of the yellow. And then I'm going to go over the top again with my white. And when it comes, my yellow, actually, I was kind of rushing through that. It's not the most even in the world. So I'm going to go in and touch that up a little bit more. And then I'm going to go over with the white and try to even that out. One thing that you can do with your white colored pencil, you can use a lot of pressure. And when you start burnishing with a lot of pressure, it actually starts blending what you have underneath a little bit. So that can help you kind of even out your mark. Once you're pretty confident with the color, you can use a lot of pressure to just blend that out. If I was going a little bit slower, it would be more even. And if you've got the time or the interest in doing this again and practicing some of these blends, maybe do it at half speed and just kind of see how your technique changes, just for the sake of like giving you a lot of information really quickly, so that you have a lot of tools to go forward with. I'm just kind of rushing through it a little bit more. But we're going to finish these two tertiary colors, the same way that we did the primary and secondary colors. So I'm going to go through with my red orange. I'm going to lay down a light layer of red orange, and then I'm going to add the black and the white, and I'm going to create that tone. And I'll do the same thing on yellow orange. So while I'm doing that, just so you guys know what I'm doing, I'm happy to answer some more questions about anything you guys are curious about with colored pencil.
Not really a question, but one person asked if you could reorient the full color wheel a little bit higher next to the other one.
Yeah, no problem.
Just for the recording purpose.
I'll raise the whole thing up. Okay. We good there?
Good. Yep.
Okay. Let me secure it with one more piece of tape if I still have that around. I haven't set it off too far.
And a lot of people really liked your tape trick.
Oh, good. I'm glad that it'll save someone's life at some, not life. It'll save someone's project at some point. And I'm happy that you have it. It's a funny little trick, and it's nice to have it in your back pocket. It can leave like the shape of the tape. So just like, it's not perfect, but it's nice when you're in a pinch.
And then one question is, why do we burnish? Is it to finish it and make it shiny?
Yeah, that's one reason for burnishing. It gives it that final waxy texture. But another reason for burnishing is for mixing colors. So I'll show that right here. So here I've got my red orange, and then I've got my black over the top, and there is a lot of white coming through, and my eye is working a little bit harder to optically mix all the colors. So what I mean by that is that these colors aren't mixed together like pigments are, where all the pigments are actually smushed together and it becomes a new color. These are layers of color that are being mixed with our eyes. Now, when I go over the top with white and a lot of pressure in this one, and let me zoom in. Let me see if we can see that a little closer. Okay. When I go in with white, I am actually starting to smush the colors together a little bit more because I'm flattening the tooth of the paper. I'm using a lot of pressure. And at this point, I am getting a more even color. It kind of will help smooth out some of my colored pencil mark as well. That's not necessarily a look that I have for every single one of my projects. I don't just like get the color in and then smush it down every time. But for this color wheel project, I like that. It helps me kind of finish off the color a little bit more. It helps me move quicker than I would if I wasn't using that strategy. But often when I'm working, so my kind of, I didn't really talk much about what I draw with color pencil. I draw lots of different subject matters because I'm a teacher and I like to draw in what my students are working on. and help them with their projects. But my favorite kind of thing to draw is often like flowers and portraits. And if you want a little sneak peek of my work, you can pop over onto Instagram. It's the same as my YouTube. It's just Lana Glowshot Art. And you can you can pop onto my Instagram and kind of see some of the projects that I'm working on. But they're usually like my florals, very, very detailed florals. And I'm building them up with lots and lots of layers. And by the end, they've kind of burnished themselves because I've laid so much colored pencil on top of the project that by the end, I've kind of achieved that waxy sheen without having to like intentionally go over the surface with a lot of pressure with a color. And that's just kind of like a completely different approach. We'll be doing that a little bit in the premium class with the cone flower, where we just build up so much colored pencil that you create that final texture on its own without intentionally saying, okay, now it's time to burnish. Hopefully that answered that question. I don't know if you've noticed this. I tend to ramble. I get like, you guys give me an idea and then I'm like, oh, there's all these other things I want to tell you about burnishing or about mixing or about pressure. So if Gianna, just focus me back if I can go, if I go way too far off, okay?
Kind of like rephrasing the question, I guess. The colored pencils are made out of pigment and wax. So burnishing happens when you layer to mix the pigments. Was a response to what you were saying, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to summarize it for sure. And that does kind of like introduce another topic that some people that have been exposed to colored pencil before might be interested in or heard about. So there are actually a couple different kinds of colored pencils out there. There are colored pencils that some artists refer to as wax-based colored pencils, and then colored pencils that artists refer to as oil-based colored pencils. Now, artists are making up these definitions, not vendors or art stores. So when you go into an art store, you say, I'd like an oil-based colored pencil. They don't often know what you're talking about, but artists use these terms to kind of discuss how much wax is in a pencil. And the waxier a pencil is, the easier it is to blend and to burnish. And the color pencils that I'm using, the Derwent Chromaflows, are probably like not the waxiest pencil I've ever used, but they are more on the waxy end of the spectrum. So they're going to be a little bit easier to blend. They're going to be a little bit more opaque, but they don't hold a really sharp point as well. Whereas like a pencil that has less wax content and more oil, some artists will refer to them as oil-based colored pencils. Those hold a sharper point and will do more like fine detail work. So here on this window, same as all the other ones, it's going to be my red, my yellow orange, which I mixed up first. And I can go over that several times. And then I laid the black over the top, but maybe I want to go over it with some orange and some yellow again. That's totally fine. Sometimes people will ask me like, oh, what color do you lay down first? And how much and what order do they have to go in? And sometimes there's an answer to that really matters, but like 9 times out of 10, it doesn't really matter what the order is. Just that you're being thoughtful about it, that you're laying your colors down thoughtfully and that you're thinking through the process and that you're making decisions that take you where you want to go.
And Lana, just so you know, we are wrapping up on the hour.
Yes, we are. So let me show you one thing really quick so you guys can finish this on your own. And then I will give you a little bit of information and we'll send you on your way. So I teased about this earlier, that colors across from each other on the color wheel are called complements. And these colors, when you mix them together, are going to create a more neutral color. So I'm going to do that really quickly in this window. I'm going to make this little triangle with my orange. I'm going to lay a light to medium level of orange over the top. I'm going to do a light layer of blue over that. And I'm going to go back and forth mixing with my orange and my blue. And you'll notice that this does something very similar to when I added black, but it's actually creating like a more vibrant neutral color. And often I will use complements to neutralize the colors. I showed you guys that in the stem the stem of the cone flower that we're going to be doing in the premiere class, that I used green and red, which are going to be opposite on the color wheel. When I finish this up, my blue and yellow are going to mix together and make green. And then that red and green are opposite on the color wheel. So when you finish up your colors, and you might just make a note of this since we're not finishing this all together tonight, complements are two colors that are across from the color wheel, and you'll fill those in. You'll notice over on my color wheel over here, I'm not doing those for my tertiary colors. It's just too many colors mixed together at that point. So I'm just doing them for my primary and secondary colors all the way around. And the goal there is to have the hue, so in this case, orange, I'm going to have that a little more orange than blue. And over on this side, I'll have a little bit more blue than orange so that they actually are different colors. And hope you guys can turn on a podcast, finish this up. Remember that the order goes around. So when you mix the red and the blue together, your violet is going to go right here. Okay. So, and then you'll mix your tertiary red violet, your tertiary blue violet. And then when you come over on this side, you're going to put green in between your blue and your yellow. If you want just a quick little cheat sheet to go around, you can just go red, red, orange, orange, yellow, orange, yellow, and then you can fill in the rest of your paper. Yellow, green, green, blue, green, blue, blue, violet, violet, red, violet. And you'll get to finish that following the same order, that all of the same the same steps that we did before. And then you'll have a completed color wheel. And I would love it if you would tag me on Instagram if you finish one up and pop my name on it. I'd love to see what you finished. It's just going to be at Lena Glowshot Art. You can check out my YouTube channel to connect with me over on YouTube. That would be great to see you guys there too. And then I also have online courses. It's just lenaglowshotart.com, and you can get access to my courses. And I just would love to connect with you. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about color tonight, and hope to see you in the premiere class next month. Gianna, were you able to get the date for the premiere class?
Yes, and I've sent the link. It is the August 18th.
August 18th. Okay, perfect. And were there any last questions that popped up in the chat that we can answer really quick?
Nothing really specific. A lot of people are just saying thank you and they love the session.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you guys were all here tonight. And if questions do pop up for any of you as you're working on these color wheels and finishing them up, just shoot me a message on Instagram. I'll check them and get right back to you. And I can clear up anything that might be confusing for you, and I'd be happy to. So yeah, so that's it. Thanks so much for coming, and have a wonderful rest of your night. Bye.
Thank you, Lena.
Yeah.